On the wall, I'll call this meeting to order. Heavenly Father, we thank you for our many blessings, this beautiful day, and the people in our community, and the right and freedom to meet this evening, to have our voices heard. We ask for your strength, guidance, and wisdom, and that we trust all will be treated with dignity and respect. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We have a quorum this evening. Thank you. Next on the agenda are announcements. Planning?
There are no announcements.
Very well. We'll move on to the next item, review and approval of the minutes of August 15th, 2018. I guess we have one correction, Paulette.
Just striking the word none under unfinished business. That's all.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do I have a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Next item is any unfinished business. I don't think we have any this evening. We'll move on to the public hearing phase, rezoning of R18-0002.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to amend the proffers approved with the Keswick rezoning. Keswick was approved in 2011 and rezoned approximately 158 acres from Agriculture 2 to Planned Development Housing District 5 to allow for 240 multifamily units, 90 single-family attached units, 84 age-restricted attached units, 150 single-family detached units, 100 age-restricted multifamily units, an assisted living facility with 100 residents, and a 36-acre public park. The amendments to the proffers requested by the applicants include the elimination of the proffered Keswick architectural guidelines, a change in the timing of the delivery of the park facilities, a change in the number and type of recreational fields to be provided in the park, and other typographical and clarification changes. Staff is recommending denial of the proffer amendment as proposed based on the elimination of the architectural guidelines and the delayed delivery of Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the park. However, staff has no objection to the remainder of the proffer amendment, which includes typographical errors or edits and clarifying language and changes to the recreational facilities. Here's an aerial map of the 158 acres. It's, of course, located here on the east side of Lake Anna Parkway, just south of our Courthouse Village area. The property does have frontage on Old Robert E. Lee, and this is where the entrance to Keswick will be located. You can see that some of these red lines are where there's subdivisions of portions of the property have already taken place and have been sold to other developers. The site is currently under construction with infrastructure, the age-restricted apartments, and a portion of the non-age-restricted apartments. So I'm going to start going through the requested changes one by one, the substantive changes. The first is the commitment to the architectural guidelines. The approved proffer commits to develop Keswick in conformance with the Keswick architectural guidelines, and any amendment to the guidelines must be approved by the county. The guidelines include standards for architectural features, design features, garage orientations, porches and their styles, building materials, fencing, landscaping. I've pulled a direct quote from the guidelines. The architectural guidelines serve as a tool to ensure that the initial vision for Keswick is preserved. The requested amendment is to delete the proffer which commits to these guidelines. The Keswick rezoning was presented to the public and the county and approved with a defined commitment on how the development would look once constructed. The deletion of the proffer eliminates the requirement for the design of the community to be constructed as originally approved. The Keswick development does have covenants and restrictions in place, which create the formation of an architectural review board and also has the architectural guidelines within their covenants. However, with the deletion of this proffer, there's no requirement that they keep those. The developer can eliminate those, water those down. There's no county enforcement of those design guidelines at that time. Staff does understand the need to adjust to market conditions, and that's been the position of the applicant, is that there are builders that maybe want a different material or a different style, and staff certainly understands that. That's why staff is recommending, rather than eliminating the proffered guidelines, that the applicant amend the guidelines with this proffer amendment now. During discussions, he's identified changes that are needed. Some include fencing, eliminating some of the fencing that was shown in the guidelines, porch depths. Those are a couple examples. Those examples that have been presented, staff has no concern with those. So like I said, that's why staff is recommending that rather than eliminating them completely, that he go ahead, amend the guidelines, and keep that commitment that was approved with the original rezoning. Number 2, the commitment to the park facilities. The current proffer commits to providing a public park with 3 soccer fields and goals to complete phase 1 of the park prior to the issuance of the 260th building permit. There was an error in your staff report. I had 26th building permit. It's the 260th building permit. So that would result in phase 1 of the park being delivered at a little more than midpoint of the build out of Keswick. Phase 1 includes the park entrance, the paved parking lot, public bathrooms, the maintenance building, and 1 soccer field. The rest of the approved language would have phase 2 of the park being delivered prior to the issuance of the 400th building permit. This is where it gets a little confusing, because in reality, the 400th building permit will never occur. Building permits, I think when this original language went in, the thought was that would be the 400th unit. There are 200 some odd apartment units. Apartment buildings are issued building permits per building, not per unit. So the result of phase 2 is that phase 2 would not be delivered under the approved proffers until complete build out of Keswick. The requested amendments are to replace 2 of the soccer fields that would be delivered with phase 2, replace those 2 soccer fields with 2 Little League fields. This is supported by staff. This is meeting a county need that's been identified by Parks and Rec. The rest of the amendment would be to deliver phase 1 prior to the issuance of the 330th residential occupancy permit, and deliver phase 2 prior to the issuance of the 433rd residential occupancy permit. Again, those OPs, of course, come at the end of construction. With the 330th residential occupancy permit, that wouldn't have the county receiving phase 1 of the park until almost the entire full build out of the Keswick development. So staff is supportive of the change in the fields, like I said, as that's meeting a need that's been identified by County Parks and Rec. However, staff is not supportive of the proposed changes to the delivery of the completed park. The Keswick development was approved with the commitment of receiving phase 1 of the park earlier in the development build out, and staff recommends that that commitment of an earlier delivery remain in place. Third, the applicant, the current language has the applicant providing irrigation facilities for the park, and that the irrigation will be provided by the stormwater management ponds. The amendment is to delete the language which states the stormwater ponds will be the source for irrigation. Staff is supportive of this amendment. County code has changed since the Keswick rezoning was approved, and if there is public water available, the irrigation needs to be provided by the public water. So this amendment is just to keep us consistent with county code. There's a few other miscellaneous amendments. First, it's updating the proffers with the new ownership information and tax map numbers. Like I said, the property has been subdivided since the rezoning, and portions have been sold to the apartment developers. There was also some language added that specifies the type of housing unit referenced for each land bay. This is just simply to say single-family attached, single-family detached. This doesn't change the number or increase the number in any way of the units that are permitted. Also, there is an amendment to the time of delivery for a trail that's to be installed along Robert E. Lee Drive. The original proffer language required that it be delivered prior to the issuance of the 320th building permit. The amendment is to change that to 320th occupancy permit. Staff has no concern with this. This is simply a difference of the time of construction. So staff is supportive of all of these changes before you. In summary, key findings in favor: the proposed revisions to the park facilities address the current needs of the county as identified by the Parks and Recreation Department, and the amended proffer statement does provide greater clarity and specificity. Findings against: the deletion of the proffered Keswick architectural guidelines eliminates the requirement to construct the Keswick community as presented and as approved by the county. The proposed extended timeline for delivery of Phase 1 of the park will delay completion until complete build-out of the Keswick development. Staff recommends denial of the proffer amendment as proposed, but recommends approval with the following point: that the revision of the architectural guidelines to include the changes that the developer has identified at this time, but maintain the commitment to the architectural guidelines. And secondly, that there be a earlier completion timeline for Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the park. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here tonight.
Any questions for Kim? I would like to go back to the architectural review and what exactly is in the covenants, because those are recorded, correct?
Yes, sir.
Covenants are recorded, and the architectural standards are in the covenants, you said?
They are.
Are they similar to what was originally proffered, or are these different?
They are the same covenants.
So anybody building in there would still have to meet the review process would be by the Architectural Review Committee for the subdivision, and the county would be out of that process.
That's correct. The concern that we raised is that without the proffer, the developer is still in control of the homeowners association. So therefore, the developer at this point in the development period of Keswick, he could eliminate those, he could revise the declaration of conditions, covenants and restrictions, and eliminate those guidelines. There's no majority. It's developer controlled during the development phase.
Okay, is that unlike a lot of subdivisions that we have in the county?
No, it's not. The only difference is that this rezoning was approved with those architectural guidelines, with a vision of how Keswick would develop, and without this proffer remaining in place, there's no way the county can enforce that Keswick will be developed as it was presented.
So can you give me an example of what the county would be interested in for an architectural review issue? I mean, I'm sitting here wondering why we would want to be involved in that.
It's not that we would want to be involved in the architectural review, but the guideline booklet that was provided showed images, examples, architectural features, landscaping standards of how Keswick would look just visually, just driving down the street. That front porch setting with side-loaded garages, it adds value and quality to the development. And so the concern is not that we would want to get into the nitty-gritty review of the plan, but that you had a presentation of how Keswick would look, and that was what was committed to, and without the proffer, there's no standard.
Back in 2011, was this proposed by the applicant at that time, these architectural standards, or was that done through the review process for the application? Do you recall?
I can't say at what stage, but it appeared from my research that it was part of the initial application put forth.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions for Kim at this point? Thank you very much. If the applicant wishes to speak.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm Jay Jarrell with Keswick Land Development Corporation. I'm the president of the company. I'd like to thank Ms. Pomato for excellent presentation there. First, I totally understand her concern that theoretically we could do away with the covenants altogether if we chose, and we would be like every other subdivision in the county except for one. I believe there's only one project in the county other than ours that the county has control over the architectural guidelines. We did proffer a guideline. We do architectural guidelines with every project that we do. Every single subdivision, no matter where it is, it's a market requirement. You have to have them or you can't sell your project. Our goal is not to do away with the guidelines altogether. Our guidelines are 7 years old. They're antiquated. Our builders, when we try to sell it to them, they actually laughed at us. So we came in, I tried to get them changed. Troy Tigner told me that he didn't have the authority to do it, that I had to come in for a proffer amendment. I think I talked to and met with you guys each individually in the winter. This is why I don't want to ever have to go through this again to change the type of siding that we have on houses. Once I ask for a proffer amendment, I've learned the hard way. It brings the entire proffer document up for consideration, and it has to go through a legal review, and anything that's not deemed proper today, it doesn't matter whether it was proper before, we have to get into it. It's taken me 10 months to get 8 changes made. I had to change the park. I had to do away with irrigation, all of which are fine, but I can't afford to do this if the next builder says, I'd really like to use X instead of Y. I'd just like to be treated like everybody else. And really, that's what we're here for today on the architectural guidelines. With the phasing of the park, what happened is we ran up against some time issues. The way it was termed is by the X number of building permit. We were concerned, and we've since worked it out about whether an apartment unit counts as a single building permit or the whole building. So it's not quite the emergency that it was at the time, but we would really like to change the word building permit to occupancy permit, because that buys us about 6 more months to get things done properly, and it really has 0 impact on the county. Nobody's going to use these facilities until they move in, which is the occupancy permit. So if we do them by the building permit, they'll just be sitting there with an empty house under construction. They won't be using the facility. But that's why we're here tonight, is I just need the flexibility to change our plans and our rules when the market dictates. Thank you very much.
Any questions or comments for the applicant?
Yes, I do. I've got a document here that says it's going to increase 10 units to 764. Can you explain these numbers? How many more residences are you going to put in here?
0 more.
0 more?
Yeah. I'm not sure what you're referring to. That doesn't.
I've got a letter from a citizen. I'm just asking the question. What's going on here?
No, sir. We're not asking to add any units. We're not asking to change any types of units even.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was verified in your presentation, right, Kim?
That's right. There's no change or increase in the number of enabled
Okay.
units.
All right, thank you. Thank you. At this point, I'll open the public hearing if anybody wishes to speak. Paul, I don't know if we have anybody signed up.
We do. We have 2.
Let me just, before we get into that, when you come to the podium, please state your name and your voting district. If you don't know your voting district, that's fine. Just give us your address. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. There'll be a green light. When it turns to yellow, you'll have 1 minute left. And when it's red, I would just ask you to wrap it up. So with that.
Francesca Taylor, followed by Vivian Stanley.
My name is Francesca Taylor. I live in the Livingston District. I live across the street from the courthouse. This is basically an integrity issue. The development was approved with the architectural standard as part of the package. The architectural standards proffer was the developer's formal declaration that he's going to build to the standards that he showed and described and that the community can hold him to that commitment. The developer got the rezoning entitlement that he got in part because he committed to the architectural standards. It was going to be 10 units by right, and it was changed to 764. This was a big change in entitlement. Keswick is a big project that will set the tone, if not the standard for development on its side of the county seat. The standard should be held or the entitlement should be adjusted. How many development units is he now willing to give up in exchange for relief of the standards? My second point is there should be no doubt that profitable residential development at our county seat can be achieved with a high standard of design quality. Vaco's company has been achieving that with townhouses and single-family homes at Courthouse Commons and apartments at the Courthouse Village, and they have been adding commercial development. Gerald may point to the ball fields and park as his sacrifice for to the community. Vaco's sacrificed land for the 208 bypass. Therefore, they really are no different. Vaco supports compliance with architectural standards. Gerald, whose development will be more marketable because of the commercial development that Vacos has created at the village, should be able to afford the same. This project includes subsidized housing. Architectural standards are particularly important in subsidized housing. Positive standards engender greater self-respect and greater achievement. This is how the city of New York conquered its litter problem. They set a high standard of clean. They maintained it until the citizens embraced it. This is not a property rights issue. As one of your own board members wisely stated a while back, when the land goes from an individual landowner to a development company, it is no longer private property. It is a commodity. I am hoping that you will treat it as such and not burden the citizens with the wish list of a developer so that he can increase his profit. It is not this board's job to ensure maximum profitability for the developer. It is this board's job to protect the citizens within the guideline of the comprehensive plan. Through the Cheswick rezoning, the citizens receive the benefit of the developer's proffered commitment in exchange for a huge increase in yield of dwelling units. Please vote no.
Thank you.
Vivian Stanley, please.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else in the audience wishes to speak for or against? Very well, I'll go back to the applicant if he wishes to address.
The only thing that comes to my mind is she brought up the example of the the village over here as a fine example of architecture and architectural features, and I agree with her 100%. And I would also point out that the county has no say whatsoever over those architectural guidelines. They were not proffered. They're not included in the proffers. They're all done by the developer, and I just want to be treated the same. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir. You did know about these designs and the restrictions when you bought this property, correct?
I placed the design guidelines in place. Yeah, I drew them up. Yes.
But you bought it anyway, and
Yes,
now
sir.
you want to change it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments at this point? Yes, sir.
Kimberly, what are some examples that would need and who would approve changes as the proffers currently stand? What would be the process? Say they wanted to change anything in the guidelines that they proposed. What would be that process of approval?
Well, at this time, if Mr. Gerald went ahead and amended those guidelines with this proffer amendment, then if there was another change needed, it would, as the language stands right now, it would require a proffer amendment process to make those changes. That's not to say that there's not another avenue to make that, for lack of a better term, easier, to not have to go through the proffer amendment process, but those alternatives have not been explored throughout this process. That wasn't the desire, but you know, that's another possibility, is to maintain the commitment to the architectural guidelines and try to find another avenue to eliminate the need to have to go through a proffer amendment process.
I see this more as, you know, 2011, the market being different than currently, and he's going to build them all. It's going to happen now. So I just see it as a matter of bureaucracy if we keep making him have to proffer, and a waste of county time, you know, having to come back to the planning commission, have another change just because you want to change a window design or the garage of the current style. I see for that reason, that's why I support getting rid of the architectural guidelines, because all the other, you know, subdivisions around here don't have them. And so I'm not sure, I wasn't around and working with the Planning Commission back in 2011 when they put them in place, and I'm sure there was a reason why, but I don't see going forward that we should, you know, isolate this one developer and hold him more accountable than any other developer. So he's certainly going to want to step it up because he is near Vacos. He's going to want his, you know, residences that he's offering to be compatible, you know, comparative with them. And so because of that, I support that. The architectural guidelines being gotten rid of, just as a matter of, you know, to keep it consistent. I also, changing it from the building permit to the OP, I think that makes sense. If there's going to be a lot of traffic and the construction of all these vehicles, those parks aren't going to be available for Parks and Rec to schedule the baseball game, the soccer game. They're going to kind of wait till that is settled. So I don't see it, even if it was left building permit, they're really not going to be used until the OPs are made. And I totally agree, the change in the ball fields, we need all kinds of fields, so I don't really see a big deal with that either, you know. But that's my take on it.
Any other questions or comments at this point? With that, I will take a motion on this application. And
Mr. Chairman, did you close the public
I'm
hearing?
sorry, yes, close the public hearing. Thank you, Paulette.
Okay, so I need to make a motion.
How do we, I guess the question is, do you want to make one motion with, I guess I'll hear the motion first, then we'll have a discussion.
Right, so well, let me think about how this has to go.
Yes.
So I would like to recommend approval of the proffer amendment as proposed by, based on the elimination of the architectural guidelines and the delayed delivery of phase 1 of the park. Am I doing that right? I don't know how to deal with the OP
Ms.
building.
Maddox,
Yeah,
can I
help me
just
out.
ask for clarification? So the request is to change all of the timing of delivery from building permit to occupancy permit, and staff has no concern with that
Okay, good
language
deal.
either.
All right.
The language that we did have concern about is that phase 1 is, under the approved proffers, to be delivered at the 260th, and with the occupancy permit, let's say occupancy permit. It would be the 260th occupancy permit, but what's being requested is the 330th, which would put it at the full build-out of the development.
Okay.
So that's just one more item to consider in your
All right.
motion, if you're supportive of or not.
Okay. So 260th. I still see that as, that's not, whatever the park, it's not going to be used until pretty much the project is built to fruition. So because of that, I want to, help me out, I want to take out the architectural guidelines and recommend approval.
I think you want to
Okay.
recommend approval of what's,
Okay.
unless you have concerns based on staff's report.
'Cause this is a lot.
Concerns.
Yeah, this is a lot of details here. So I would like to recommend approval of the proffer amendments presented by the applicant as proposed.
Do I,
I second it.
Discussion. Any comments?
Can I get clarification on the building permits and occupancy permits, building permit versus OP, when it comes to the verbiage at their proffer amendment? That got all adjusted and cleaned up as part of this amendment, correct?
Right, all of
just
them
wanna make
were
sure.
changed from building permit to occupancy
Okay.
permit.
Any other discussion on the motion?
We are not here to ensure the profitability of any developer. This gentleman bought this piece of property under these conditions. He knew about these conditions. It didn't work out for him, so now he wants to change them. I cannot support this. How many of these we're going to get after this one? If we do this, we're going to be flooded with this.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
I 100% hear where you're coming from, and I also don't want to be the cause of him not being able to build the project out because he can't sell and it sits for a decade. So I'm on both sides of this, to where I don't want a change to come to where we've got to approve it, and then all of a sudden it doesn't get approved. He can't sell a piece of property. It never gets developed because gingerbread siding or whatever is needed as part of the architectural review, and it can't be sold. It's kind of concerned about that. I don't think we should be the governing body on architectural review for development. It's just not, I don't know that. It's not my expertise.
Any other comments?
This project was originally approved because of the conditions that this gentleman wants to change.
Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes. We will move on to the next item on the agenda. Special use permit 18-0007.
Apologies, I was expecting one more item before this one.
Did I misread the agenda? Am I good?
I'll just get right into it. My
Sorry
name
for
is
the
Patrick White. I work for the Spotsylvania County Planning Department. I love this new lighting we have here, and we'll bring my sunglasses next time. This case is a special use permit request. It's called Franklin's Crossing. It's a request to seeking the permit for a 125-bed, 3-story assisted living facility in a residential 2 zoning district. The subject property is located at the end of River Meadows Way. It's a little over half a mile from that way's intersection with Tidewater Trail. Staff's recommending denial of the application. The property is sketched into the image before you in red. The property itself is 10 acres in size. It's enclosed by the Rappahannock River to the northeast, the River Meadows neighborhood to the southeast, the Tidewater Village to the northwest, and the River Heights Mobile Home Park to the southwest. All of the adjacent properties are zoned R2 or residential 2. With the exception of a small stretch of land immediately to the southeast, all of the surrounding properties have a mixed-use future land use designation. As you recall on our recent comp plan talks, that mixed-use designation supports higher density residential development and non-residential development of varying types. Its intent is to create a walkable environment for residents to work, shop, play, and live. Again, access to the parcels provided by River Meadows Way that intersects Tidewater Trail to the south, depicted with a black arrow on your screen. The applicant's GDP proposes that 3-story, 125-bed, 57,000 square foot assisted living facility. The applicants also proposed transitional screens to the southwest and the southeast. The screen to the southeast is proposed to have a 6-foot-high vinyl fence within it. A sidewalk connection is proposed connecting to River Meadows. There's also an on-site cul-de-sac which is proposed to allow vehicles to turn around on the subject property. Just after the cul-de-sac is an access control gate which would restrict access to and from the facility. The applicants also proposed a number of on-site amenities for residents, which include a little natural viewing area on the Rappahannock, a gazebo, and a seating area at higher ground, which will likely have a great view of the river. The applicant submitted a depiction of the facility with a textual description of the varying architectural elements. Displayed that before you. When reviewing a special use permit, staff reviews that request in accordance with basically 8 standards. It is not unusual for staff to have a concern regarding one of those standards and to propose a condition to mitigate that impact. Staff's evaluation of this case found that there was one standard which could not be adequately mitigated. Standard 6 questions whether a proposed facility or use is appropriately located with respect to transportation facilities, water supply, wastewater treatment, fire and police protection, waste disposal, and similar facilities. Assisted living facilities generate medical emergency response calls. Whatever number of calls are generated, there's only one path to this facility, and that's through the existing neighborhood of River Meadows. Although the streets are public, emergency response trips will regularly be needed, and each one must enter and exit through that neighborhood alone. Staff recommended a condition within the staff report that should help. However, the location of the facility cannot be adjusted. The land's where it is, and it's insufficient with respect to this standard.
Patrick?
Yes, sir.
One question. When you say that, go back one.
Yes, sir.
You got the roads are public. Now, when you say public, are they owned by the state? Are they state-maintained roads?
Affirmative, sir.
They are?
They are.
Okay.
Before you are staff's findings in favor of this case. The proposal provides housing for seniors, has relatively low demands for other public services, generates jobs, improves the tax base, provides green spaces. It's interconnected with sidewalks pursuant to the mixed-use future land use designation. It may even lead to some future traffic calming measures that would benefit the River Meadows neighborhood. Staff also found these 2 findings against. First one I already touched on, that it fails to meet one of the 8 criteria. I keep making note of that because staff needs to find all 8. Facility, and for the reasons that I've already explained. The other finding against was that the community meeting attendees had expressed that River Meadows already faced a traffic problem, which this facility would exacerbate. The applicant has proposed to conduct a traffic calming analysis. If that analysis proves that there is traffic calming measures that are warranted in that neighborhood, then the applicants agreed to conduct and install those. But there's no guarantee that any of that would happen. Even if that were to happen, those same traffic calming measures could impede the emergency responders trying to access the facility. It's a little of a catch-22 on the traffic calming. Summing up, the project has plenty of merits, but staff must recommend denial due to not being able to find all 8 standards met, and the other potential traffic calming being just that, potential, not guaranteed. Should the commission find that the proposal meets all 8 standards, staff recommends that that recommendation of approval be accompanied with the conditions listed in your staff report. There were 10 of them. I can display them if you would like. Otherwise, I know that the applicant is present and has a presentation of their own, and I will stand by for your questions.
Yeah, if you don't mind going over the 10 conditions, I'd appreciate it. Quickly.
Would you like me to read them all or just display them, sir?
You can read them for us, thank you. Sorry for the curveball.
No, quite all right. The first one is a standard one. You see it all the time. It requires conformance with the GDP. It's the first condition we always write. And it states that the applicant will build the project in accordance with the GDP, and it references the date of the GDP and the revision date.
Can we have it on the computer?
I'm working on it. The second condition is for compliance with the rendering. That is also a standard condition when there is a rendering provided.
So I'm afraid to ask, the rendering is a proffer?
It's a condition. You
It's a
could.
condition, okay.
If
Of approval?
It's
Okay.
a recommended condition.
Okay.
The third, can we have the screen, please? And let's zoom in a little. Thank you. Thanks to the guys behind the scenes for making that happen. The third condition, prior to the site plan approval, the applicant would submit a preliminary assessment of threatened and endangered species to the county for review. That condition was recommended by one of our long-range planners. We regularly look at predictive models regarding whether or not something's expected to be on site. In this case, we did find that there were 2 species which may or may not be on site. It just asked that the developer further evaluate and let us know if there are. Condition 4 was that this is one that is in direct response to the location of the facility. And that's a recommended condition that the landowner or the operator shall contract with a private transportation or ambulance service for the non-emergency transportation services. Basically, we want to be sure that the applicant has someone handling the routine trips and that they're not relying on our EMS guys when for smaller non-emergency things. Condition 5 was one that the applicant actually brought up, and we like it. It was that the operator would schedule shift changes of employees at off-peak times. We think that would reduce traffic impacts on the neighborhood.
Does that tie in with your comment about exacerbating traffic conditions? Doesn't this address that, Patrick, or are there other conditions that?
This is more so about employees and the shift, the employees that are coming, staying, and then leaving.
Wouldn't that, so I guess my question is, wouldn't that directly affect the traffic level of service versus people visiting, which would be off-peak hours?
It would make it better. It doesn't necessarily get us around the siting condition, in my opinion.
It doesn't get us around the what?
The
site?
The siting condition, just where the facility is located.
I'm interested because I'm interested in your comment about the traffic conditions, because with this item, to me, that mitigates some of the traffic concerns. Does it not?
I would agree that this would mitigate some of the traffic concerns of the employees, but not any of the emergency management traffic concerns, the trips that would be run there.
Okay, I'm still confused, but I'll.
Okay.
But so emergency services are not during the peak hour they could be any time of day or night, correct?
Any time of day.
Right, so your comment about, I just want to hone in on that so I understand. Your comment about this application exacerbating the traffic conditions, the existing traffic conditions, which I interpret to mean make worse. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement.
But with this condition, doesn't that mitigate that issue?
It does reduce the impact of that issue.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Patrick, I'm confused. So is the traffic issue with the emergency services going in now? Is that what you're saying?
That is my big concern.
And that is the number of trips?
That is the EMS call volume that goes to one of these facilities. That's a special kind of trip. It's not a regular trip that someone visiting their grandmother or an employee. It's a faster, potentially noisier trip.
Okay, that's my question, because I'm confused because I was reading this. Are you concerned about the noise or the amount of trips that they're going into the facility?
Well, it's more so that any emergency responder going to the facility, their duty is to get there as quick as they can and presumably pick someone up. And then it is their primary duty to get them somewhere else, a hospital, as quick as they can. And in doing that job, they have tools at their disposal. They have lights, they have sirens, and they have a gas pedal. And they use those 3 tools to make that trip as quick as they can. And the only way they can do that is to go through this residential neighborhood. So regardless of which tools they're using, whether it's lights, sirens, or speed, there's one way in and there's one way out. And that one way in and that one way out is through this neighborhood that was there before this. And there's 50-some odd houses on the way.
And how many trips a day would EMS be making in and out of there?
I don't have great data on that right now. The data that I do have, I can estimate. A few years ago, to my knowledge, the most recent senior assisted living project in the county is called Bickford. Bickford is a 60-bed facility. Of those 60 beds, 15 of them are memory care beds. We don't know exactly how many memory care beds will be here. But that facility itself had, as I recall, approximately 120 trips a year last year, the first year it was opened, and it's half the size of this. So could be anywhere from 200 to 240, but I also caveat that with, we haven't done a whole lot of analysis of these things, and I think to some degree the management of these facilities dictates the amount of trips that are necessary to them.
Not to put the fire chief on the spot because he's here, but with
Call him up.
with the ambulances going in and out of through the subdivision, and I understand your concern, but is there Chief, do y'all have any type of policy when they're going in and out of subdivisions as far as speed is concerned?
It's all going to depend on the type of call. So we do not set a standard that says that they cannot exceed the speed limit in a residential area. Of course, they're going to be more careful. I would say the only concern I have with it is units responding through a residential area with the not just with the cars, but with children in the neighborhood, honestly even pets in the area, and just the traffic. We usually don't. You think about on the reverse side, we usually don't build a fire station in the back of a neighborhood to respond out through it. It's kind of the same situation there. But to answer your question, no, we don't say that you cannot run license sirens or you cannot exceed the speed limit. We do set a max amount that they would exceed the speed limit by, though.
Okay, I'm just confused about this because I don't see the difference in any other subdivision if they go into that comes to a dead end street, such as my subdivision. I've only got, you come in past my house, you got to go to the cul-de-sac, turn around, and they come in. My mother lives in one of these places, and the ambulance is there quite a bit. But I will say, in the fire trucks, I have to give them credit. They come in, they come in slow. It usually doesn't, I mean, I don't know what the calls are they're there for, but I mean, they're usually, pretty professional when they come in driving those trucks and ambulances and looking out for people. And they have to come through a subdivision on that. I'm just a little confused about whether it's the noise that we're concerned about or the equipment going into the subdivision. Or if it's a combination.
It's all. It's those.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Chief.
And I asked something. I mean, not every call that's to one of these assisted living is a grab and go. Sometimes they're there to help someone up. I could speak to that. My husband's a fireman, and he's ran at a company where they have a lot of assisted living facilities around. Some of them, I can speak to this. I'm not an expert, but I just think going forward, this is a definite area where we have to get our funding right, like how many calls it will be, and get it kind of as close as possible, so that we can make sure that we're able to make a good risk, decision based on that. Because it's really, I do know that when I talk to my husband at work, he's telling me, oh, I went to this place and I helped someone get up. And no, I didn't take them in, I just helped them. And so I think there's a lot more of that happening than we realize. I know when I read all this from the applicant, they go, oh, well, we have staff on duty. Nowadays, staff is scared to touch them, because they won't help them up. They'll leave them and call 911, and so I can speak to that because I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard it secondary from my husband. So I just say going forward, that's something that we have to take into account. One of the questions, does this subdivision have sidewalks?
On both sides of the street.
Praise the Lord. Okay, just checking.
Yes, I have
go ahead, Ms.
something.
Carter. Yeah.
I'll go along with Mr. Smith on this part. There are subdivisions all over Spotsylvania County, everywhere. I checked with 2 assisted living places personally, talked to the directors there, and I asked the question, how many calls do you all have in your data of emergency services have to come to your facility? 4 or 5 a month? 2 of them told me that. And neither one knew I was calling the other one. And this is what they told me. Okay? And so therefore, that's with what Mr. Smith is going along with. Also, saying at this time that there are other subdivisions that's probably getting more than this, than what this assisted living would get at this time. Now, another question I have, okay, since there's just one way in and one way out, then joining subdivisions, please correct me on this and tell me if I'm right or wrong. If this was passed, would the joining subdivisions have an opportunity to go through the metas? The regular subdivision, the subdivision that's there. Could they go? Yeah. There's not a connection there now, right?
Yeah,
in this proposal, am I correct?
That's correct. And I'll bring back up the GDP just to clarify and make sure I'm getting your question. The access to the sites provided through this connection to River Meadows. There is no other access provided on this GDP.
Okay. No other access, not from the trailer park, not from Sylvania Heights.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Sure.
By right, what can happen to this piece of property?
They could build 10 single-family houses on it.
Cool.
By right.
I think that'd be a good idea.
May I ask, and go with that also? All right. 10 houses can be built on it. Now, let me ask you this. By right, there could be a connection to the other subdivisions. Am I correct?
That is incorrect. We did look at that. Our original tax map, our GIS system, appeared to depict a place to make that connection. We looked into it further. It was vacated some years ago. It legally does not exist anymore. So hypothetically, the applicant would have to buy it from someone.
The applicant would have to buy it. Who was buying the property could buy that from someone, and then there could be a cut-through. Am I correct?
If that property owner were willing to sell.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that. I suppose that could happen.
And it could happen. Am I correct?
That could happen.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
By right.
Without the county being involved.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So how many trips per day for this facility? Do you have that? I'm looking through the GDP. I didn't, maybe
I have that.
Lee can answer that, but.
I'm thinking it was, if you'll just give me one moment, I have that.
But we can come back to that and move this along if you want, Patrick.
No, I have it prepared. 333 vehicles per day are estimated from the facility.
And a by right subdivision would have how many trips per day?
100.
At 10 to 10 is 100. Okay. Thank you.
And that vehicles per day, I will note that, with these shift changes, that number is probably a little high.
Okay.
Picking up with the conditions?
No, I'm good. I wanted to get to the traffic issue because I was confused as well on it. But yes, Mr.
One last question about the traffic. On this street going in there, the main street, is it parking on the street?
Well, it's not, I don't know that there's anything that says it's allowed, but the neighbors definitely do it. There is definitely on-street parking occurring. And you can see that in the GIS imagery.
Are they designated parking spaces, or they just park on the
They
street?
just park.
Yes.
So
Mike.
along those lines, I've driven out to this property several times, and each time I've driven out, probably about 1:30 in the afternoon on a weekday, and I had to stop twice to allow traffic to pass on the main drive because cars were parked not side by side, but across from each other, only allowing one way through. So this is an interesting point that was brought up, and we don't have really good clarification on that. Is that allowed, and will that be enforced, or now all of a sudden the neighborhood can't park there? Because I'd be very surprised if a truck could get through there for, say, logging or for clearing to get through there when I drove through there. It just simply would not have been wide enough because of two cars parked, across from each other on the main road. So how can we get clarification that they are or not, are or aren't allowed to park on the road?
Well, to my knowledge, they are allowed to park on the road unless there's a sign that says no parking on the road. It's possible, though not guaranteed, that might be one of the things that comes out of the traffic calming study if one were to be conducted. That sounds kind of like a pretty easy thing to do to get cars off the street and allow better flow of vehicles in the neighborhood.
Yeah, however, now you're taking away something that a resident who might have bought there years back has utilized and all of a sudden can't utilize anymore.
Well, it's not guaranteed that would be one of the recommendations. I mean, one of the way that particular language is crafted, the county and VDOT would need to concur. And, if I'm hearing you correctly, and you wanted to make a recommendation to approve this, that you would consider adjusting condition 10 to say the county won't approve or the county won't approve no parking signs on the road, or something along those lines.
I'm just not for taking away something that a subdivision has already. So putting signs up would mean taking away something from.
It would.
And yeah, I definitely wouldn't be for that. I just think I know we talk about ambulance traffic through subdivisions, but I can't think of an example in our jurisdiction or surrounding where there's such a facility inside of essentially a subdivision. And I'm trying to figure out where there may be an example of that. In Lee's Park, there is the care, but it's right on a main drag. It's not going through the neighborhood. So is there any example that you've seen where you're going through an existing neighborhood to get to such a facility?
The closest one I could come up with was one that's not built yet, but that Keswick rezoning case that we just talked about has an assisted living facility at the end of it. Now, I think that Keswick Road would ultimately connect somewhere else, and they're also coming in. It was approved as a rezoning. It was a package deal, but I'm not aware of any other ALFs that are, for lack of a better term, embedded within a residential neighborhood.
And that was coming off a Spine Road, though, correct?
That was off of a Spine Road.
Okay.
And that Spine Road, I believe, was even, that's even going to be a future collector road.
Okay. Thank you.
Patrick?
Yes, sir.
When you have an opportunity.
Yes, sir.
Check with VDOT on that, on the parking, because if the state owns that road from sidewalk to sidewalk, normally they don't allow parking on the road. I mean, in a subdivision where there's shoulders, where people park in front of the house, they have to pull off where no tires on the asphalt to meet VDOT standards, where they're improperly parked. So I'm just confused about this, because it's a little bit different, because they own, you said the sidewalks on both sides, correct?
So sidewalks on both sides, roll
So
top curbs.
I would think that the state owns to the sidewalks.
Safe bet, but I can verify.
And just so we know in the future. And then my other question, with vehicles parked there, are we able to get a fire truck through there?
School bus.
Yeah, if we're getting school buses through it.
So we can. Okay.
Any other questions or?
Hey, Patrick, can
Yeah,
I ask
yeah.
another one? I think the last meeting or the meeting before, we voted on something at Ross Drive, assisted living. I can't remember how many houses.
I think that was just senior housing.
Was it senior housing?
Yeah, those were senior townhouses.
That was senior?
Senior
Yeah, because I was like,
townhouses.
because I was sitting here, I was like, I think that, I couldn't remember if that was something similar or
Yeah,
what.
we identified another senior housing development that was embedded into a residential neighborhood. It was called King's Crest, I believe.
Okay, yeah,
But I think we're looking at a different population
I
distribution.
got you. I was just thinking, because we sure have seen a lot of these.
Good.
Mr. Chairman, did you want me to continue with the conditions?
No, unless the other commission members want to hear it, I'm all set with that. Thank you, Patrick. Anything else you?
No, sir. Just a reminder, the applicant has a presentation themselves.
And I'll call them up right now.
Mr. Chairman, other members of the Planning Commission, my name is Charlie Payne, and we represent the applicant. Appreciate your time this evening. Lots of good questions. Hopefully I can answer some of those questions for you, and appreciate staff's presentation. It is really light in here. I'm not accustomed to it. I feel like it's time to go. It's so bright, but I'll be as quick as I can, understanding that I do have a time limitation. Staff has noted this is one parcel, consists of 10 acres. It's off of Tidewater Trail, the Inner River Meadows Way. I'll have a GDP to show that. It is a request for a special use permit to develop a 125-bed assisted living facility. It's zoned R2. Under R2, we are required to get an SUP for an assisted living facility. As the discussion has occurred earlier, by right, we could do 10 single-family detached units. We could also do recreational fields. If anyone's accustomed with that corridor, there are several recreational facilities, including at the Elks Lodge and also at Dixon Park. Along the river seems to be a very popular place for that. Construction is anticipated within 24 months. If this is approved, that'd be just one-time construction. It wouldn't be done in phases. This is one building. If you did something by right, the construction period would be much more extended beyond what we would anticipate. Open space, over 50% of the area is going to be protected and preserved. As you know, the river is just to the immediate east. It's very bucolic, very scenic, buffering along the property lines. There will also be a 6-foot privacy fence to our west, as Patrick had demonstrated. There will also be a nature trail to the river on the site. We think this will be very attractive for our residents and their family members. Surrounding area, you've heard that. We're surrounded by mostly some older developments, also a mobile home park to our west. Of course, River Meadows is to our south. Also, the Rappahannock River is to our east, and all the surrounding properties are zoned R2. Here's the GDP of the site. You see to the east, the Rappahannock River, Tidewater Village, closer to Sylvania Heights. Is to our west, to our north. To our west is River Heights, which is a 180-unit mobile home park, and of course River Meadows is to our south. Comp plan, this project is very consistent with the comprehensive plan, which encourages a diverse housing mix. As many of you know, assisted living and similar type of facilities are necessary in our county and in growing need every day. If you think about this part of the county, there's no assisted living facility close by. The closest assisted living facility is likely at Hughes Home in the city of Fredericksburg. So if you think about a need in the area, this is absolutely a place that needs it. This area is also a mixed use for future land purposes. So if you think about that, our mixed use ordinance encourages the greatest density residential and the greatest FAR for commercial. So this is encouraged to be something much more than what we're proposing. When we first came out with our plan, we came out with 32 townhomes, and the neighbors didn't like it. And we heard them loud and clear. So we thought, hey, something that would be not as intense, even though the traffic counts are a little bit more with this use, they're not as regular. We don't think that our employees are going to speed through the neighborhoods, and of course our residents are not driving. The comp plan encourages, again, a better mix of residential commercial tax rate. You may be familiar with Spring Arbor. We only had 48 beds, and it generated net tax revenue for the county of about $150,000. This project is about 125, 150% larger. So you're going to get a greater tax revenue out of this project as well, over $350,000 estimate. There also appears to be a need, as I had stated, this particular part of the county, and the project does not adversely impact the housing market in the area nor compete with our neighbors. Here's the architectural rendering that we proposed for the project. You can see it's very nice proposal for architectural features, high quality. We think something that our residents and our neighbors will enjoy. And all this is part of the conditions. Environmental and historic resources. This site has been mined in the past, so there is no historic resources on the site. There has been a Phase 1A done. Slide, please. Transportation, access to the property, as staff had noted, be via River Meadows Way. There used to be a 50-foot access easement. It was vacated back in the 80s, not sure why, but there did used to be a second access point. Roads within our project, of course, will be gated. It'll be private. Daily trips will be low. They're going to be low during peak hours, 18 during AM and 28 during PM. And again, we'll have minimal impacts to overall traffic corridors and intersections, as staff has concluded in its report. Assisted living facilities, typically their employees come to and from during off-peak hours. And of course, that's a condition as well that we'll be more than happy to follow. Crash data, staff's analysis, crash data, the intersection of River Meadow and Route 2, over 5 years has been one minor accident. Project will generate significantly less vehicle trips than what is encouraged under the comprehensive plan. I think we need to understand that as well. The applicant agrees prior to final site plan to perform a traffic calming analysis. I was surprised to hear staff say that that analysis would not take into account, in essence, the impacts to fire and rescue. That is part of the analysis. If that was something that we had to do and also include traffic controls. I'm sure that all that could be done collectively. We were also not asked whether we could mitigate what is basically point number 6, which I'll get to in just a second. Schools, no impact to schools, which is always very positive. Parks and Rec, no impacts to our parks, but we will have a walking trail and, of course, a river right there to immediate east. Again, something we think is very attractive for our residents and our guests. Public safety, Fire and Rescue Station 11 is about 4.9 miles away and will provide emergency services. What do assisted living facilities do to reduce calls? One, we're consolidating individuals at one site who are in need of assisted living assistance. If you think about our county and our different residents who are located throughout this very large county, one of the largest counties in the Commonwealth of Virginia, think about the impact to EMS services to have to respond to individuals where they may be located. When they're consolidated in one facility, that reduces that impact. It reduces lots of costs, it reduces a lot of manpower, and gives them the ability to react to emergency situations in a greater time. Also on site, there are professional health care services, individuals who are trained to do that. We have even suggested that we will have a physician on site if that's a condition and there are concerns about whether immediate emergency services can be provided to individuals if there's an EMS call. I represent 2 assisted living facilities that do have nursing home and memory care. They have a professional physician on site. They work very well with EMS. In fact, they coordinate with EMS. You're right, there are times that there's a fall or an injury on site. There's always concerns about picking them up off the ground and getting them off the ground without having EMS there. But a lot of times, a lot of emergencies are avoided because the professionals are on site and because of the controls that are in place. Staff report, respectfully, I can't remember a time that I disagreed with staff, but I disagree with you wholeheartedly on this analysis for number 6 specifically. Your standards of review do include 8 points that have to be satisfied. Of course, this planning commission can agree or disagree with that analysis by staff. Of those standards, if you just look at standards 4, 5, and 7, they seem very inconsistent with the staff's conclusion on standard 6. Note number 4, which addresses that a project cannot adversely affect the health or safety of adjoining neighborhoods. Staff said we passed that one, okay? Look at number 5. The proposed use will not be detrimental to the public welfare or interest of person, property, or persons. Staff said that we satisfied that one. Look at number 7. You cannot have undue traffic congestion or create a traffic hazard. One hand, staff says we're creating traffic problems with our use because EMS must respond to us, which they must respond to anybody in the county. And on the other hand, they're saying we're not having an impact on traffic. I just respectfully disagree with her conclusion. In fact, I think it's very speculative to base our proposed use on one other user in the county. I also think it's a problem if you suggest that EMS somehow is a nuisance. How can it be a nuisance to whether it's our use, River Meadow subdivision, or any subdivision in this county? If you applied that rule across the board in this county, where would you put a fire station? Where would you put a hospital? Where would you put an emergency clinic? Have you ever been next to a fire station when there's a call? God bless them. God bless them. It's loud and they're next to neighborhoods, and people accept it because it's part of community services and what we inspect as a community for emergency services. Also disagree with the fact that there are other projects this county has approved that do have similar access, and I'll get to that in just a second. And again, these type of facilities work well with EMS in regards to reducing those EMS calls. Next. This is Lafayette Square. Lafayette Boulevard is to your west. Right, all very familiar with it. Townhomes, right off Lafayette Boulevard, there's sheets out front. In the back is an assisted living facility that was approved. It's not developed, it wasn't developed, eventually that land was donated to the Park Service. But look how the access is. It goes right through the middle of the townhouse development to the assisted living facility. That was 100 beds in the back. The county has approved such a project. Next slide. This is Cosner's East. Hospital across the street. See the red line, assisted living in the back, Cardinal Village? Those are apartments all the way back to that site. Apartments all the way to the west. There's a hospital across the street. Next slide. Spring Arbor. Recently approved for actually a rezoning on this site, which extended this is the current site, which extended the number of beds at this site. This has 100 beds. Everyone comes in Spring Arbor way. See the villas to the west? All single family. Alexander's Crossing, Jackson Village, approved by this county, all include assisted living uses, all within proposed other residential uses and commercial.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it.
May I
happy to
ask
answer
him
your
a
questions.
question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You will not, the applicant has stated that there will not be an entrance that would connect to another subdivision or development. Am I correct?
This project does not plan to connect to any other area other than where we are at River Meadows connection, as proposed.
Okay.
If we did this by right, I disagree with staff. If we did this by right, VDOT very likely would ask us to look for a secondary connection. That secondary connection is very likely at River Heights.
It's where?
At River Heights, the mobile home project, which could create a cut-through for both developments.
Okay. And I guess, I hope that you all have addressed the shifts. I believe I heard something about that, of the time that the employee shifts would go in, and that would coincide with the traffic for the school kids and those things.
Right.
Okay? I can address that later.
Right. Typically, the operational aspects of a use like this is off-peak hours. It's 3 shifts, and we're very open to ensuring that we're not having, including during construction times, making sure that we're doing that during non-peak hours. Yep.
And weekends, right?
And weekends.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have some other questions, but I'll wait.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead, Howard.
I do have a question. On one of your slides there, you said the applicant would agree to have a physician there?
Correct.
Is that 24 hours, or is that during certain hours? Or?
That's a good question. I don't think we'd have a problem with that. It's moving in that direction. The industry is moving in that direction to have a physician on site for many reasons. For one, a lot of the facilities are getting larger because it's very difficult, just so we understand that it's very difficult to have affordable assisted living facilities or nursing homes unless they take Medicaid. If you're in an assisted living facility, it's not Medicaid, okay? So it's expensive. So the land has to be cheap. That's just a reality in order to make it work. And so you're seeing more units in more rural areas, off the beaten path a lot as well, in regards to these type of future uses. So the larger they get, the more professional health care needs that they need. So that's why that movement is happening now in that industry.
You, on the cover sheet, I finally found the trip generation. I apologize. And that's based off the trip generation manual. Do you have any actual data on that? Or
We were told we didn't have to run a traffic study because
Okay.
it wasn't a big producer, and we weren't impacting the level of services.
Okay,
They're all staying at A and B.
thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. With that, I'll open up the public hearing. Same rules apply. Please come up and state your name and your voting district. And on the podium, you'll see the box with the green light. You'll have 3 minutes. When it turns to yellow, you'll have 1 minute left. And when it turns to red, I appreciate you wrapping up your comments. Please address all your comments to the commissioners. And do we have anybody signed up at this point?
Yes, sir. Curtis Dunn, followed by Brian Butler.
Hi, thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. My name is Curtis Dunn. I live in Lee Hill. I live on River Meadows Way. I'll address a few things. Hopefully you don't take the lack of participation on the May 10th meeting as any kind of lack of concern on the residential neighborhood. I know that we missed it because the envelope did not jump out at us. Now, I'll take full blame for not opening every piece of mail I get, but it did not strike me, and so therefore I missed that meeting due to not knowing that it was there. Actually, I thought it was like refinance spam, the way it looked. If you read in your in the notes, Brian Butler sent an email, and I think he stated a lot of it well, so I'm not going to go too much into detail. There's definitely an increase in traffic. When you start talking about traffic, when the numbers that they use basically a planning factor for the 32 townhouses of about 5.8 factorial. They've stated that there's 1,100 vehicles inside the neighborhood, and that's with 128 houses. So I have to assume that 125 beds of family visiting with emergency vehicles, with staff, is going to equate to more than 333 vehicles a day, because that's only about a 2.7 planning factor. Understand that 125 does not necessarily represent the residential thing. We talked about the 50-foot roadway. It is 50 foot, I think, initially. As you stated, it does narrow as you go into the neighborhood. When you get down, I think, to the point you said that you'd made, it is definitely, if we have 2 vehicles parking, I guess that's something we'll have to figure out whether we get that taken away from us or not. But if you have 2 vehicles parking on the road, you can only get 1 vehicle through there. You should be able to get, as I understand it, EMS. I don't think that's a problem, but just don't think that it's a 50-foot roadway all the way down. This, like I say, worried about depreciation of house values. We still haven't recovered from, those of us that have been in the neighborhood at least 10 years, haven't recovered from the downturn. Previously, we're not even back up to the values. I can't imagine, even though there was an unfounded assertion that this would not affect house values, it's not going to make it better. So I can't imagine that we're getting any net gain from that aspect. By having this cut through to a business, this fundamentally alters the essence of the neighborhood, the reason we all moved in. We did not, somebody talked about, you might have a fire station there, and so therefore you have trucks going by. We didn't move into this place when there was an EMS hub there. This is being moved in on us. I say, talk about the distractions and whether EMS vehicles are going to be a problem. Do any of y'all have 120 vehicles going down your road every year, and that's the conservative guess? I mean, my father, unfortunately, spent a couple of months in assorted assisted living homes at the beginning of this year, prior to his death, and so I've seen some of the operations go on. I know that they're not all coming in blasting, but if there's an emergency there, siren is typically on, lights are on. If they're doing transport, typically lights are on. Middle of the night, that's shining right in my window. It's affecting my quality of life, my family's quality of life, and that's 24/365. Like I said, that's not really speculative. It's definitely a nuisance. I would like to just...
Thank you. Your time's up.
I was going to actually say something positive. Basically, I do believe the area does need this kind of facility. This is the wrong place to put it. And you'd have unlimited support for any kind of 10 single-family residents to be put in this area. All I ask is don't destroy my family's life for tax benefits.
Thank you.
Brian Butler.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Brian Butler, and I'm in the Lee Hill District as well. I believe you have my email, so I won't rehash that, but I would just like to address certain points that were brought up during this meeting. One of those points is that one of the mitigation factors is to change the shift of the workers coming in. Now, as a good parent, at 6 o'clock, 4 to 6 o'clock, I don't have my kids out riding their bikes. It's just more dangerous. If we change the shifts for the workers, now there's potentially 4 times during the day that I wouldn't want my kids out riding their bikes. And they're kids. They don't always stick to the sidewalk as much as we try. So the danger to the kids increases. To your point, Mr. Smith, is the problem the noise or is it the traffic in the vehicles? The noise is definitely detrimental. However, my biggest fear is the kids that get hurt, or the parents that are pushing strollers, or whatever else is going on in a nice residential neighborhood. To the point on whether parking is allowed on the street, I can't say for sure, but what I will know is my neighbor happened to receive a ticket. The ticket was not for parking on the street. The ticket was for parking too close to a fire hydrant. So if that's any indication, I don't believe anybody's ever got a ticket for parking on the street. And then finally, I would say we all purchased houses with the idea that there was a possibility 10 new houses would come into that area. 10 houses that would be very similar to ours. We saw diagrams of assisted living facilities in townhouse areas, in apartment areas, places where people buy that expect high traffic, high density of people. But we didn't buy that. We didn't buy houses expecting that the permit would change, or I should say a special use permit would be given, and that we would then come into a high density area. So as my neighbor explained, my house has not recovered, and that's not the sole goal here, is to recover our values. It's nice, but adding in all that extra definitely changes the neighborhood we all purchased and are raising our families in. Thank you.
Anybody else? Paulette? No one else? Somebody else in the, yeah. What?
Hi, my name's Shane Lack. I'm in the Lees Hill voting district, and I agree with what this gentleman said. When the letter came in May, we happen to be in Arizona, but I'm adamantly opposed to this. I think it totally changes the character of the neighborhood, and it could definitely harm our housing values. I'm a safety engineer, and I wouldn't want that traffic going through this neighborhood. When I'm going through that neighborhood, I got to be very careful. I don't want this noise. In my neighborhood, I didn't buy into it. It was sold as 10 homes. It should be built as 10 homes. That's it.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Evening. My name is Martin Petrie. I live in the Lee Hill voting district. I do vote. I live on River Meadows Way. I'd like to echo everything that's been said by the dissenting speakers before me. We did not buy into this neighborhood with the expectation that what amounts to a commercial development would be built at the back of it. I don't begrudge assisted living. I don't begrudge the premise of the need for the facility, but as it's been said before, this is not the right place for it. Boards like yourself have lots of responsibilities, not the least of which are to protect the citizens of the county. Our expectation when we bought property in that neighborhood was that that property, if it ever got developed, would have 10 single-family houses on it. Changing that use for this use at this point, when there are 128 or so other people that have already bought into that initial expectation, is tantamount to enriching a developer at the expense of the people who already live there. Your staff doesn't recommend approving this for very good reasons, which they've outlined in great detail, and I'd urge you to vote no.
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name is John Syriacs. I live in the Lee Hill voting district. I was asked to come here by my parents, who are currently in Arizona, retrieving my grandmother, who is going to be moved into Cardinal Village, which we saw earlier, an assisted living center, memory focused, that is, as they said, next to an apartment complex. But I've been driving into there pretty regularly in the last few weeks, and there is no point at which I saw any children whatsoever. That is a straight shot from the hospital. 2 of his 3 examples were directly across from a hospital. And our neighborhood is one that was meant to be out of the way, that was meant to be not on the way to anything. There is that development, and you heard the support for someone putting in 10 new homes. Everyone was erupted in applause if they went by what they said, but they came first saying that they're going to put in all of these condos, and no, they're going to be luxury condos, but eventually they get turned to, if they don't sell as luxury condos, then we'll sell them as something a little less nice, and a little less nice until we sell them as Section 8. And when that didn't fly, when we got an equal outpouring of dissent from the neighborhood, they thought, let's go with something that they can't argue against as strongly. So if this were in favor of, if this were something about protecting the elderly and seeing to it that the elderly had the care that they need, then I would consider it. But this is an attempt to make more money than was expected to be made from this parcel of land. They're trying to squeeze as much as they can from it, and where that money is coming from, as was said by the gentleman before you, is from the people who live in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Jay Cullinan, I'm the fire chief. It's not my job to speak in favor or against any of these. I just want to offer up a viewpoint that I would like you to take into consideration, or the developer may be able to take into consideration with this development. Essentially, having a high-density living arrangement at the end of a one-way street does cause me some concern. I don't know if the site has any capability to provide for any kind of secondary emergency entry and egress if the primary route of travel was blocked. So if that's something that could be worked out, that would be a great addition to what is on the plans. I don't know what's on the site as far as availability to do so, but if we had that roadway blocked and one of those patients, or one of the residents, excuse me, in that facility needed assistance, essentially our units may not be able to get to them. So I just want to make sure that if there is a possibility of having, again, it can be strictly just emergency entrance or egress, that be considered as a possibility.
Thank you. I'm sorry, you already had a chance to speak. I'm sorry. Anybody else? I'm sorry, but if you wish to come up and speak, you can. Yep. Anybody else at this point? All right. With that, I will close the public hearing part of this. I don't, if the applicant wishes to.
I think Mr. Smith wants to do something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, other members of the Planning Commission. Again, Charlie Payne, to represent the applicant. As always, very much appreciate the comments from the community. We had 2 community meetings. One was a different project. One was a 32-unit townhouse project, and talking about squeezing profits versus our proposed use. We'd rather be doing a 32-unit project, which is a lot more valuable than what we're proposing. But nonetheless, we do appreciate their comments. And again, when you go through this process, you do your best. You're not perfect, but you do your best to mitigate those impacts to your neighbors, because hopefully they will be your neighbors in the long term, and hopefully we can all get along in the future. I did submit copies to you guys, not sure if you got it or not. Mr. Ortiz, who's a 16-year resident in River Meadows, wrote in support of this project. I sent that to the Planning Commission members. Also, Mr. Hallberg, who is the owner, one of the owners and managing member of River Heights, also sent in a recommendation for approval, or a support letter, I should say. He also added, and to the fire chief's point, that we could possibly get an access easement, if need be, across his property. And if it was to be restricted in private for emergency purposes, that's something we would certainly, if it was a recommendation from this planning commission, that's something we would certainly go and get. Because as you saw in the letter he sent to you, he was open to providing that. So I think that says a lot, and I think supports what the fire chief is saying, and we wholeheartedly understand that. House values, these type of uses are in mixed-use projects with, as you saw, the examples that I provided you, all throughout this region, all throughout this county. It doesn't have impacts to values. In fact, it adds value when you have that type of diversity. We also don't want to isolate those in need. Why would you isolate people who are living in assisted living? We want them to be part of the community, feel like they're still part of the community, at the same time have peace and tranquility. Expectations, I hear this a lot. There's a lot changing. This area is growing. We all know that. It comes with growing pains. This area has been zoned R2 for a very long time, including our site. Future land use says this is going to be a more dense, a greater growth area. Those are some of the realities that we all have got to deal with. And this type of use, in my opinion, is not as intense as being proposed by our land use plan. This is something that's very compatible. It's a good buffer with the adjoining uses of some of the older neighborhoods. I mean, these folks are living next to a mobile park. That has an impact on property values. It's just a reality. It's also living next to some much older developments further to the west. So, I'm sorry, further to the north. So, this is a good buffer. Believe me, this is a very good buffer and a new investment in the county that will pay dividends. It will help pay for school-aged kids to go to school. That will help pay for new parks, because it's not going to have an impact, a negative impact or an adverse impact on our county core services. And again, I've heard this several times, and I want this out of our memory banks, because emergency services are not nuisance. They're not. I wish that would have never been put in a staff report. I love these guys dearly. It just shouldn't be in a staff report, because that's not how it should be characterized. So with that, I'm happy to answer your questions you may have.
Yes, Mr. Medina.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Charlie, I'm kind of curious about something you mentioned. So you feel that to a developer, 32 townhomes is more economically beneficial to them than a 125-bed facility that's generating income on a monthly basis?
Market-wise, the pricing on the land for purposes, we're not, we're going to be selling this to a user for purposes of the market, on the land for the use. The townhomes in the short term are the much quicker, much more profitable.
Okay. Another question. You mentioned about the comp plan.
That's Charlie Payne's opinion. So.
Okay, understood. You mentioned about the comp plan, the comprehensive plan and the mixed use, and I think we all agree, and we've used it several times, the comp plan is a guideline, correct? And we are constantly adjusting it to kind of fit the need. I don't see mixed use going in that area for a long time, because you're going to have this entire neighborhood leveled and adjusted in the future. So, decades down the road, maybe. But it's also, I think, a guideline that I've heard you use in defense on the other side of some of your projects you represented, that it's just a guideline. And so, yes, I know that you would like to, we have it marked as mixed use, but it's an area now that I'm kind of curious why we have little slivers of green mixed use in our comp plan versus a bigger, I guess, future or vision of the county.
I think in this particular case, we'll just kind of back up a little bit. To me, I look at highest and best use for all projects, whether the comp plan agrees with that or not. That's sort of what developers look at. That's the investment, that's the market, that's how it's driven. Planning is a lot beyond the market. Planning is about long-term vision. Think about what's just to our west. That's a very old mobile park. One day it's not going to be a mobile park. It's going to be something else. River Meadows will be around for a while. It's more modern development. But to our north and to our west, that's going to change. And my bet is that's what the thinking was about why it should be mixed use. So it encourages redevelopment. So again, that's why I made the statement. I think we're a very good mix in that component, but not as intense as it could be.
And then one other piece keep bringing up about we're seeing EMS traffic being a nuisance. And I don't think that's what anybody is saying. I think what the concern is, for me especially, I've never seen anything like this. All the examples you gave don't compare in my opinion. Our Lafayette Crossing, that land was donated, as you mentioned, so that's not even on the table. It's not going to be developed. All the other ones are in an area that have a spine road or in an area that the assisted living facility was designed around apartment complexes and mixed uses as part of the GDP for that project, or the hospital included. And for that, I just can't see why this can compare to anything that we have in the county or other jurisdictions. Again, I just don't feel comfortable with the amount of traffic use. Yes, do I love the facility where it is on the river, an assisted living facility and something like that? Absolutely. Do I love it at the end of the neighborhood? Not at all.
Guess we'll have to agree to disagree, because all of those examples I showed you have common access. You'd have sirens, you have lights. Right? Just based on staff's assumptions. These are my assumptions. The access is the same, but based on these assumptions by staff, there's going to be an impact. And in Lafayette Crossing, it's not fair to say, well, it wasn't developed. It was approved by this county in a very similar concept. I don't know how much, I think that's the most similar example we could show. You got to go right through the middle of the townhouse project to get to it. There's no way around it. There's no other road. It dead ends at the assisted living facility and then back out to Lafayette Boulevard.
That's all. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question for staff. Charlie just mentioned this thing at Lafayette Crossing. Wasn't that all one big package? Was the assisted living added on to this?
It was all part of one plan of development.
One big plan?
Yes,
So the people that live there accept what happened because it was part of the plan.
correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith wants to say something, I will.
I just got a comment. I understand the concern about the noise and the fire trucks and ambulances going down the street, but I just don't see the difference than them going down any other street in the county. You know, I have to look at my end of the county, where I represent. Our streets aren't even state maintained, some of them. Don't even meet standards. And those trucks go up and down. And you know, I applaud the fire department. I don't want to jinx them by saying this. I have yet to see them have very few accidents, and I can say, since I've been here in this county my whole life, 60 years, I don't know if any fire truck or ambulance has been in any serious accident in this county. And I'm just confused about that part of it. Why we're saying that that particular road, we're worried about the fire trucks and the ambulances going in and out. And I can tell you, once again, my mother lives in one of these places, and the ambulances do come and go. And they come right by an apartment complex with kids out and 2 bus stops. And I've never seen an issue. And my question on that road, because I heard somebody speak about the road gets narrower at the end. Where's the state maintain, where's it stop at on that road?
It's the full road length. It gets all the way back to the property. And in fact, as I recall, that cul-de-sac that's proposed by the applicant was going to be dedicated to VDOT for them to maintain that as well. So to my knowledge, it runs the extent of the roadway.
So where the road narrows is still meets state standards? So is that what I'm hearing?
I can't testify that the road narrows. I don't remember seeing that when I was on site.
We are building a link from that access point, from the River Meadows where it ends, River Meadows Way, to our site, and that'll be dedicated, and it'll include a cul-de-sac. So we'll make, it'll be widened for our purposes, that's for sure, getting in and out.
Can you, I'm sorry, Mr.
Sure, no, you go ahead.
Can you call up a tax map or a map and show me where this easement would?
Where it used to be?
The easement that we could get for the site, the access easement that would be granted. Do you have that? Do we have that?
Pull it up on the map, Lee can identify it.
Yeah, Lee, if you'd help me out with that, I just want to see that.
Pulling up the GDP. Pulling up Charlie's GDP.
That's okay, if you could show me where,
Would you like to draw? Sir, Mr. Garrison is depicting that secondary point of access to be along the course of this mouse. Approximately.
is there an existing easement, I'm sorry, I can't read the small print here, but.
There are private roads within that.
Okay. You blow that up a little bit, Patrick. There you go.
Once again,
So
Lee,
you have that force main, is that a sewer force main, Lee? Do you know?
Yes, yes.
Sewer gravity in a
Force main
sewer
extends
force
back to a
main,
pump station.
okay. Intended.
At one time, the mobile home park was going to extend back on that.
Okay.
Great. All right. I have concerns about the hazard, the nuisance, and whatever also, because in reading staff report in several areas, the standards in review for special use approval. And number 4, it says, proposed use will not adversely affect the health or safety of persons residing or working in the neighborhood. And the reply back from staff comment, the proposed facility should not affect the health or safety of persons within adjacent neighborhoods. That was stated, okay? That's, I'm not getting what we're coming at as transportation. And then these comments, were there. Number 5 says, proposed use will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property or improvements within the neighborhood. Okay? Staff comment states, the proposal should not be detrimental to the public welfare or the property or improvements within the neighborhood. Staff report, correct? Okay.
That's what it says. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. And number 7 states proposed use will not cause undue traffic congestion or create a traffic hazard. Standard. Staff comment, left turning movements out of the river meadows are problematic, but the proposed facility should not cause any significant additional congestion or hazards. And to be honest with you, I read that part of it. I was satisfied. Okay, that transportation issue has been answered. I talked to one of my fellow board members and was shocked off of my feet because that board member, that commission member, reads everything tit to tat, and reminded me that denial was there because of the transportation issue. Well, as I read, it's not a transportation issue. It must be called a nuisance because here, this is what that staff report says. However, if I had known that in the beginning. Some way I would have worked, as I have been working so hard on this. And the last 3 days have really been rough. And then a memo stating from you, Patrick, I love you to death, but however, I have to bring up points, okay?
Well, that sounds ominous. Can we turn down the lights a little first?
No, here you're answering a question, okay? No, I have approvals from all reviewers. I'll be working on the report in the immediate future. Per Charlie, we're taking, which is Mr. Payne, we're taking the September 5th, which is today, meeting. If any other questions pop up during the writing of the staff reports, I'll reach out. If you want to provide any draft conditions prior to the writing, then I'll surely consider them. Why in the world would you write them when it says that everything's working out and all reports are back? I mean, and that's why I thought everything's fine. Here we go, you know? They worked out everything. I mean, I know there were issues. I attended the community meetings. I was on the Board of Supervisors when this subdivision was approved for a higher density. I remember that. Yes, the roads do meet VDOT standards. The school bus wouldn't be going down there. But anyway, I thought everything's fine. But then when I read this, bang. And I don't think that it was fair to the applicant because they did not get a chance to answer this or to maybe do what they had to do to improve, but I don't think they could improve anymore. And I want to say this. I live on Mine Road, and I'm telling you, you're talking about sirens. Boy, you should hear them. But you know, and I lived one house from the sub-fire station for years and years, and I thought, oh, me. But you know, I learned every time it went out, I said, thank you, God. We got a fire truck. Thank you, God. We've got an ambulance that takes care of us. You know, that's important. That's important. And do I think that assisted living is important? Yes, I do. And I will always stick up for the elderly. I will always stick up for the children. And my concern to the applicant was such, how do we jiggle or juggle or whatever we want to do so that our school children are not out here, and then we have traffic that these employees will be going to work. What do we do with that? How do we work that? I want those children to be safe. And I believe that staggering the employment hours will certainly help. And I think you said that, Patrick.
Yes, ma'am.
And I believe that. Personally, I will say this. A by right scares me. It really scares me. And the reason that it does is I'm concerned that that would bring in more traffic, cut-through traffic, than it would assisted living. Assisted living is going to be a calm traffic that you would have. A cut-through traffic is going to be, get out of my way, here I come. That's not good. And that's what I would deviate from. And as I stated, I guess maybe I'm getting older, so maybe assisted living so much to me, but however, you know what? If I was living in River Meadows, and my mother and father was somewhere else, I would certainly, and if it's approved, I would certainly think, boy, I'd love to bring mom and dad to this facility because I'm right next door. I can walk over. I can see them. I can go sit on that riverbank with them. I think it's a beautiful setting, even though you might say it's in the wrong place, you know? But what is ever in the right place? When the subdivision was approved, everybody told me it was in the wrong place. They didn't want a subdivision on 2 and 17, Tidewater Trail, but we worked it out, and we got it. And welcome to all of you. But anyway, I I just, I don't think, I mean, I think it's a use that is necessary. I think it's a use that's going to touch many lives. I think it's a use that's not going to be harmful to our children and our students at that time. And there are traffic calming without putting the humps that everybody has to go over. You have traffic calming. You know that you can put up signs that says $250 caught for speeding if it warrants one. And I just hope that no one living in that area would, but I don't think they would. But that slows your traffic down. And then you have children's signs, you know, watch for children, bus stops, all of these things that we have to put in place everywhere. And I have the privilege of going to a nursing home once a month. That nursing home is in the city of Fredericksburg. That dead end is right there. That dead end is there. And the homes are absolutely beautiful, just like they are in River Meadows. They're absolutely beautiful. It's quiet, it's tranquil. When I was there not too long ago, I was looking for my son who was going to pick me up. I couldn't find him. He was sitting back on the porch because it was so quiet and nice. And so I don't see, you know, where it would be a nuisance at all. I really don't. And with that, that's all the question. Oh, I'll shut up. I could say a lot more, but however, I might become emotional. I don't want to do that either. And I don't want to hold you all up.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. At this point, I will take a motion on this application.
I would like to make a motion for approval with all the conditions that we have in place. And would I have to have a different condition, or may I put on a different condition that if the emergency services feel as though that they would like to have an entrance or an exit there, that maybe they could work it out with the applicant? Can I put that as a condition or not? It's not on here.
Yes, you may recommend additional conditions.
I would like to make that as a recommended condition, that the applicant and the fire chief talk and work this out and what they come up with as a recommendation and what they would do. I know personally that the applicant will do whatever they can to make this a safe place. And that's all I'm asking, and that's what I want. So with that, I make a motion for approval.
Okay. Other commission, yes.
A question, Ms. Carter, on your
Yes.
on your motion. Are you asking the applicant and the fire chief to work that out for that access that the gentleman, I guess, sent in, or are we asking the applicant to work with the landowner and purchase that property to do a right-of-way through there for emergency services?
Well, I would say if it would warrant one, that's my, if it would warrant one, I think that would be a decision between the fire chief and the applicant.
I just want to be clear.
Mr. Payne's going to help out here.
I would like to see, if I could just comment on your motion, I would be much more supportive of this if the applicant worked with that landowner and acquired that piece to make it a right-of-way for emergency services to enter and exit that property so they wouldn't have to go through the subdivision.
I was going to suggest that one of the conditions include, as you have stated, Mr. Smith and Ms. Carter, that we'd have a secondary emergency access only and that we would be obligated to get that secondary access prior to site plan approval.
And that, exactly, and that's it. Now, how do we word that to make sure that that we prevent any cut-through traffic, only emergency service when it's needed? Because I certainly don't want to cut through traffic there.
Typically,
not from the other subdivisions.
Typically, how it works, access to our site would be gated, and the EMS would have a key to that gate, and that would restrict any other sort of secondary access. Only EMS could get in and out of that site.
And one that you can't crawl under?
Well, we have we'll
I'm
make sure
serious.
we'll make sure there's no limbo going on
All
out
right.
here.
Mr. Smith?
Ms. Carter, if I heard Mr. Payne correctly, and please correct me if I did not, what Mr. Payne was actually saying was to add a condition that somebody on the Planning Commission could actually add a condition that they have to obtain a secondary way of ingress and egress. If you condition that, make it a condition of the SUP, then what you need to do is amend your motion to not suggest that, it's easy, to not suggest that they talk, but to say, you already said you liked all of the staff recommended conditions. What you want to do is reword what you said, if you agree with Mr. Payne, to say, and I'd like to add a condition that the applicant be required to obtain secondary means of emergency ingress and egress.
With the applicant?
That's
Okay.
correct. That's fine.
All right. I made it. You just made it for me.
The applicant accepts that as an additional condition.
Okay.
With a gate.
With the gate.
Yeah, with the gate. All right. Have I got it right?
So the motion before us is to approve the application with the additional condition that the applicant secure.
You can have Ms. Mann read it back if she's
Yes.
able to do so.
Oh, she will. She can.
Just so we're all clear on this. So what's prudent here for Ms. Carter to restate her motion?
No,
Can I just add an amendment to a motion? Would that help her?
Well, at the moment, we're not, I don't
We-
believe
we-
everybody's
we-
clear on the original motion.
We're not clear on the original
Well, we hadn't
motion.
even vote, there hadn't even been a second on the original motion.
That's correct.
And it does need to be amended
So-
because, yeah.
If you would like to know the word, and I might be the parliamentarian here, but what I heard, and I believe what Mr. Payne agreed to, and anybody should correct me if I'm wrong, what I heard Ms. Carter move was that she would like to move for approval of the special use permit with staff's recommended conditions, as well as a further condition that the applicant obtain emergency secondary ingress and egress access.
With a gate.
With a
gate.
There you go. That's,
That is what I believe, Ms. Carter, you amended your motion to be.
Okay. Yes.
Then, and I'll second that.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith seconds it. I don't dare ask this, but any further discussion?
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, with that, so we have the motion seconded. No further discussion. I will call a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
2 noes. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to
This
the
guy,
next.
all this say, and you do something in our neighborhood?
Excuse me, sir. The public hearing's over, sir.
This wasn't a public hearing.
Excuse me, sir. The public hearing's over. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Let's see. Amendment, case number 18-0005.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ordinance amendment before you this evening is an amendment to the subdivision ordinance, and it's specifically because of the Chesapeake Bay Act. The county is currently undergoing review by the Chesapeake Bay Act, and there are a number of changes that have been identified that need to occur to our codes. The Chesapeake Bay Act is currently addressed in Chapter 6A of the county's ordinance. There are a number of provisions in it that relate to development of land and subdivision. So nothing I'm speaking to this evening is new. It's all found within Chapter 6A, but the Chesapeake Bay Act, in their review, they've identified that we should also reference these items within our subdivision ordinance so that it's clear to anybody that's coming forward with a subdivision that they need to comply with these standards. And specifically, they include notes related to the Chesapeake Bay Act that limit development in the resource protection areas, that's the 100-foot buffer, and that plats served by on-site sewage systems, septic systems, that they will show both a primary and a 100% reserved drain field, and that on-site sewage systems are required to be pumped out every 5 years. So these are all existing standards that are found in Chapter 6A, and so we are also including them within the subdivision ordinance, and some of these items are specifically notes that are put on subdivision plats so that anybody that looks at their plat knows right off the bat that they're going to have to do a 5-year pump out and that there are restrictions to building within that resource protection area. And when this was authorized for public hearing by the Planning Commission, there was a question about the Chesapeake Bay Act and our experience with it and the effect it's having. So I reached out to Richard Street, and he provided me with some information, so I'll just read parts of this. The Chesapeake Bay Act has resulted in a better understanding of the true sources of the pollution and sediment loads in the bay, and we are seeing positive signs of the aquatic life returning to the bay. The preservation of the 100-foot RPA, resource protection area, results in a natural filter that allows pollutants to be filtered through the vegetation before entering into waterways. And these buffers also have allowed for aquatic life to return within many of the streams where we had lost the aquatic life. The minnows are now returning to those streams. So there is positive progress being made. The construction practices with newer guidelines have implemented almost 92% of the 2025 goal, which is ahead of the estimates. And so while we are making great strides towards that 2025 goal, there's still work to be done. And so continuing to enforce the Chesapeake Bay Act and require these provisions within the subdivision ordinance is seen as a positive step towards doing that. So with that, staff does recommend approval.
So this is this requires an action tonight. Any comments, questions?
Are there any subdivisions, family, for an example, that are exempt from this, or are they still what triggers this as true subdivision?
Right. So the Chapter 6A does have some exceptions based on when a lot was created or when a house was built. I don't know the specifics of those, but there are certain exceptions out there related to the septic fields, the 100% reserve provision, but not related to the RPA. The RPA is enforced consistently throughout the county.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
This part about like you have to be pumped out every 5 years, we just have to find a way to enforce that. You know, I know so many people that don't pump their system out. And if we're going to make it a expectation, then we should follow up with something.
Yes, I do know that the Code Compliance Department sends out reminders every 5 years and does collect that data, and we do have to report on it as well. But I know that is part of the review that we're going through, is they're looking at that procedure.
Wanda, is there, I'm trying to think through the building permitting process, the building permit process. Is there any information available to a prospective buyer in regard to whether it's a conventional system or an alternative system versus just, you know, the pumping requirement or pump out at 5 years or primary?
I don't know that there is anything in the public process that.
Do you know? I don't know if this is a question if you know, but to get a permit though, the septic application has to be made. Is it at that time? Is it determined whether or not it's a conventional system or a?
Yes. The VDH septic permit will need to be acquired before you can have your occupancy permit. So certainly at that point, you could have those records,
Okay.
yes.
In regard to the Ches Bay Act, if it pleases the other commissioners, I'm very interested if Richard could be available to do a little work session with us, especially in regard to new technologies and some of these things that, in residential construction that we're utilizing these days. I think it'd be beneficial, and when we go to evaluate these subdivisions and things like that, if there's no objection, I think it would be most helpful to us to understand these requirements. You know, if the other commissioners are supportive of that, I'd certainly encourage that.
I'll pass that on to him.
Yep, I'd love to hear from them. Any other questions or comments on this? So you need a motion on this, correct?
We need a public hearing first?
You need a public hearing. Very well, so we'll open this up for public hearing. I don't know if anybody would, yes, sir.
Guys, my name is Jeremiah Horstick in the Livingston District. And in relation to consideration for new technology in the building industry, new homes, as a member of the Fredericksburg Area Builders Association, I would like to say that the sentiment is that we would be happy to contribute to that discussion. And, you know, we're available, call on us to bring any kind of information that we can bring to the table with our experts as well.
That would be great, and I'd ask you to work with Wanda on that. Any other, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, any other comments? With that, I'll close the public hearing portion of this. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll take a motion on this. I'll move to approve this.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Wanda, we're into a work session. Patrick?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. This is what I believe to be a short update regarding our update to the comprehensive plan's public facilities element regarding libraries. Planning staff and staff from the Central Rappahannock Regional Library System, CRRL, have been working on an update to the comprehensive plan's public facilities section. Miss Martha Hutzel, the director of the system, and Miss Rebecca Purdy are present tonight to assist with any questions. Thank you for being here. There's no need for a formal vote or action on this item, but we welcome your input. In addition to providing a physical place for physical materials, today's libraries provide electronic resources, on-site services, technologies, and assistance, and an ever-growing list of outreach services. The edits within the current clean version reflect efforts of the CRRL and planning staff to modify the language within the comp plan to acknowledge the current library programs available in the ever-changing role of the library system. In addition to the new language, there are new standards that have been added to reflect the changing role to provide electronic resources, notably the workstation and the makerspace components. The standards themselves changed very little, and the chapter remains supportive of a new Cosner's Corner facility, mobile facilities, and the potential use of existing space. Table 1, which includes the current status of library facilities, has been updated. The version displayed before you contains 2 new columns for workstations, makerspaces, and a brand new facility, the Spotsylvania Town Center branch. At a glance, using our most recent population projection for July 1st, 2017, the county remains deficient in library spaces and materials and makerspaces. The CRRL has embraced their demands for workstations, and presently the system is exceeding the standard for electronic workstations. Staff's currently evaluating the exact service areas using the rural and the urban drive time standards through our geographic information systems. That information is pending and should be ready for you in the near future. That concludes my very brief, short presentation. Again, I congratulate the CRRS system for the new Spotsylvania Library branch. They are present should you have questions, and I will stand by for any questions.
Can you back up a couple of slides there, Patrick? Okay, so that is a summary of the, walk me through this table. So that's a summary of the gross
Yeah, sure.
square footage.
I can walk you through the table. This is what we have. The branch facilities on the left, floor space is this next column, books within that branch is the next column, workstations within that branch is the third, and the makerspaces is the final column. Those workstations could be either a Chromebook, it could be something that they could just pick up at a desk and take to a little cubby, or it could be a physical computer station where someone sits at. The physical collection is composed of those three branches that are at the very top of the table. Then on top of the physical collection is the Fredericksburg branch. The Fredericksburg branch is a little special. For lack of a better term, we've split it three ways. Fredericksburg, Stafford, and Spotsylvania are all served by that branch. So we've done a three-way split on the materials, the space, and the workstations within it. On top of that physical collection is a digital collection. The digital collection consists of audiobooks, ebooks, probably videos and some DVDs that are available online or in a digital format only. There's another 45,000 materials there, and the final column sums all that together.
So,
Final row, sorry.
So this is Spotsylvania, or is it regional?
It's Spotsylvania.
It's Spotsylvania, and do we know regionally where we are with library space? Is that?
I'm sure the CRL has that data. I could dig it up for.
And then my next question is, do we have a measure on the need for library space, or is it more, is that this
slide.
Okay.
Yes, using the standards that weren't changed. Okay, the collection standard, which is 2 to 5 items per capita, the facilities standard, which is 0.6 to 1 square feet per capita, those didn't change any. The location standard didn't change any either. The workspace or the workstation, that's new. We're above. We have a surplus there. The makerspace is a new addition. We're at a deficit of 2 there. The goal there is to have 1 in each facility, and right now we only have 1 in 2 of the facilities. The collection and the facility standards we are showing a deficit on though.
So we have a deficit of almost 100. Is it 100,000 collection and facility? 100,000 square feet? Am I reading that right?
No, the facilities would be in square feet. The collection would be in materials.
Oh, materials. Okay, so we have a deficit of 35,000 square feet. What, with new technologies, internet, and what impact does that have to that? Are we satisfying the need through our technologies, or is the answer square footage?
My answer to that question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, folks from the CRRL, is that the standards that are proposed within this comprehensive plan element take into account that there are also digital products available. So factoring that into the decision, we're still at a deficit.
But is internet available now in the areas that these rural areas? I'm not sure where we are with that. I don't know.
It's not so good. There is not necessarily broadband to our rural areas yet. That remains to be a challenge in Spotsylvania County. One of the CRL's outreach services, however, is to send, for lack of a better term, a mobile internet, and I'm going to need you to.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, is that I want a bookmobile. I had it when I was a kid. You know, I'm in Berkeley District. We have rural areas. I'm a teacher. Half my class doesn't have the internet. I want the bookmobile to come to Partlow Ruetan. You know, I'm trying to work that out so that my kids will have the internet and have access to books. And if you could bring some food, that would be great too. Since I'm making my wish list.
It's not in my budget, I'm sorry. Do you want me to go ahead and start answering questions? Or I am Martha Hutzel, I'm the library director, and I live in the city of Fredericksburg.
I believe the one thing that they'd certainly be interested in is the Library to Go program, that program.
So when the bookmobile died a few years back, it would have been close to $400,000 or $500,000 to replace it, put 2 people on it, and stock it, and then of course put gas in it. So we did not replace the large bookmobile that used to go out to the rural areas. We have actually 3 separate things now. We have a smaller vehicle, which is much less costly, and you can send 1 person out on it safely because no one gets on it. And that goes to assisted living and nursing homes all over the region. We call the whole concept Library on the Go. Then we have another small vehicle, which again, you can put 1 person on and is much less costly to run. And that goes to Head Start, daycare centers, and preschool programs. So we're getting those ends of of our lives, so to speak. We are also in the process of purchasing another vehicle because we received a grant from the Community Foundation, and that vehicle will be like a mini bookmobile. We will go out to areas that are underserved and don't have internet access, like we do at Belmont Community Center and like we're going to do in the Berkeley District as soon as we can. And that vehicle will have Wi-Fi access, computers, books, materials for children, early literacy materials, and children and families could come onto the vehicle, or we could go into a community where there's a community center or something like that, and then take materials in. So it'll be a combination of all 3 of those things. So that serves the rural area quite a bit. There are huge pockets in this community that don't have high-speed internet access. So Monday nights, we are out at the Belmont Community Center, and that's a partnership, with Spotsylvania County and the Ruralton Club out there. We're seeing between 10 and 20 people every Monday evening out there. That sounds like a small number, but for those folks, it's not a small number. So we're very happy with that, and that's the sort of thing that we want to keep doing. The standards are Library Virginia standards, and we try very hard to meet those standards. We are working on that. This area is growing too fast for us to be able to keep up with those standards, and as Patrick said, they have not changed. It's just that so many more people have moved here, and we've built so many more homes that we haven't been able to keep up with them. The long-term goal for a branch in Spotsylvania County would be in the Massaponax area.
Something that's interesting to me is I watch my son, do homework. I help him with homework. Everything's online.
Mm-hmm.
How do we accommodate that in these rural areas?
Well,
the teacher does? Is that how we?
Teacher does. We don't assign online homework.
You don't assign?
It's it's the haves and have-nots, you know what I
It
mean?
is.
Like, we don't
It's
have it out
unfortunate.
there, so I can't, even though in my classroom, I use Google Classroom all over the time, all over the place. But even some families that do have the internet, they have limited data.
Right.
Because it's so expensive.
Correct.
And so you're the kids out in Berkeley, Berkeley Elementary area, we don't assign that homework.
The Belmont Community Center project came to us actually between the county and the schools, and they said, why can't we put a library in one of our schools? And it just wasn't a good fit. I think I've spoken to this board on that before. So we got the idea to put it at the community center at Belmont because Wi-Fi was going in at the fire station next door. So we have laptops there. We have things for kids. We have books. There's, 2 young ladies who push books in there, every Monday evening. That's the sort of concept that's very inexpensive to do, and it brings access to people in a rural community, and they don't have to get in the car and drive for, 8 or 10 miles to do homework. Of course, we have the Snow Branch out here at the courthouse, and there are just a lot of people who do not have access to the internet to do that work. It's unfortunate.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
You said your son does homework?
Believe it or not, he does, yes. In fact, he doesn't.
That might go on the minutes. He might use that against
He
you
doesn't
one day.
do it enough.
Well, I thought maybe he was doing it at school, like what most of them say, I'm doing this at school.
It's a great use of the technology, but yeah, they do a lot at school, but he does a lot at night on Google Classroom, and it's amazing to me. It's a tremendous resource in technology.
It is. The the cool thing that we just did with, support from Spotsylvania County was opening that branch at the Spotsylvania Town Center.
Yeah.
It's been extremely popular. It's open Friday and Saturday nights, and it's open Sunday from 11 to 6. So it's 73 hours a week. It's, can be run with just 2 or 3 people in there. It's 2,100 square feet. And I believe Cafaro Company gave us rent-free space because they know people come in to use the library and will do other things while they're there.
Yeah, one more question. Do you see that's where the future of libraries is going, these smaller, more convenient locations than the bigger facilities that?
I think a big county needs 2 or 3 big ones, big libraries. This county is nearly there. And then several small ones in neighborhoods or satellite libraries would cover it.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Patrick, anything else? No, sir. Thank you. You don't need any action tonight, right? No, sir. Thank you. Very good. Quickly, we'll get to any new business other than what we heard tonight. Moving on to public comment. Any additional public comment?
We had Vivian Stanley sign up, but I believe she's left.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair and fellow commissioners, proper greeting this time. I grew up in Spotsylvania County and, with the Central Rappahannock Regional Library. It's a tremendous resource for what's online. And I use the library too. I still get books from the library right over here. In a lot of the rural areas that we don't have internet access, that does limit our students. And there's old technology that you can achieve 30 megabit per second speeds internet. And in rural areas like that with microwave technology, I see towers, and I've looked at the topography of the county, and I think it's suitable topography, and there's an opportunity for investment in that kind of internet, which would give us broad access, which something else that Rob Whitman had mentioned when he had a STEM symposium here in town. So that may be something that we can encourage as a county, to encourage private investment into internet access for the more rural parts of the county. Now, aside from the fact that in 5 years, Elon Musk will probably have satellites over the entire county.
Something different.
But that was the other thing I had on my mind. And in terms of, I don't know if I could touch back on what we were talking about earlier. No?
I'm sorry, you
okay,
can't. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Anybody else? All right, thank you. With that, we'll get to, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you.
Yeah.